Okay, we'll call the February 8th meeting of the Planning Commission to order. We'll begin with the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jess, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Tiedemann.
Here.
Mr. Varga.
Here.
Mr. Cicero.
Here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Mr. Perkovic.
Here.
Mr. Sidoti.
Here.
Mr. Snow.
Here. Entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes of the January 18th meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Jess, when you're ready.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. We have no public hearings this evening, and under old business, item number 1 was tabled at a previous meeting, will remain on the table tonight. Is that right, Kathy?
Yes.
So there'll be no discussion on that. So item 2, architectural review of a commercial building, Diamond Center Drive. Is that applicant here?
I am.
Okay, we'll entertain a motion to take it off the table, please.
So moved.
Second.
Jess, when you're ready.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. Tom O'Neill once more, Menard Incorporated, 5101 Menard Drive, Eau Claire, Wisconsin. Where we last left off was, since the project was originally approved, we had switched from a tilt-up concrete panelized construction with a buff Belgian edger overlay to a tan split-face block with a sienna-colored Belgian edger overlay. And originally, at the last meeting, we didn't have a good example of that material type in the field. So while the store is under construction, I got a couple close-up shots tight to the store to demonstrate the contrast from a color, material type, texturing, shadowing effect. And with that, we're hopeful that it suffices and meets your pleasure, and you'll be willing to approve us and move us to construction.
Okay. Kathy, any comments from the administration?
None at this time.
Okay. Any comments from the commission?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Varga?
have you ever built a building with this material before? This color pattern?
It's under construction right there.
No, I understand, but is there one that's done that you can see the awnings and the trim?
No,
and
sir.
So this is the first time with this color palette?
That's correct.
So that's
It's
why.
not a colored panel. It's
Palette, I'm sorry.
oh yes,
that
sir.
wasn't
I'm
clear.
sorry.
So you can't actually show us a picture of what it's, one complete, what it looks like?
I cannot.
All right, well, I appreciate the effort to, with these photos, the ones that you provided. It'd be nice to see what the actual building would look like as a whole, you know?
Okay.
So,
Any other questions, comments? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Jess, would you call the roll?
Mr. Tiedemann.
yes.
Mr. Varga.
No.
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. So you'll identify those colors for the administration.
We certainly will.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 3, conditional use permit to allow drive-through facility at Menor Avenue. Is that applicant? I see that applicant's here, so I'll entertain a motion to take it off the table, please.
Motion to remove from the table.
Second.
Jess, we might as well do number 4 as well, since it's the same applicant.
And
So can we take that, gentlemen, can we take that as both of them, to remove them from the table? Want to modify your motion?
Motion to remove
3 and 4.
3 and 4 from the table.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ready, Jess?
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. Brought the big guns today, huh? Got all the guns here.
Hello.
So why don't you identify what you'd like to do at that location?
Okay, good evening. We have submitted a revised site plan for your approval, accommodating the changes pursuant to the December 21st meeting, as well as subsequent recommendations. From the last meeting, we reduced the one-way bypass lane on the east side of the building to 17.5 feet. It was originally shown as 20 feet per code, so that was narrowed by 2.5 feet. And in addition, other comments that were incorporated in the revised plan, we extended the landscape island at the drive-through entrance and added 3 spaces to the existing parking aisle. We added directional signage on the pavement to guide customers entering the drive-through. And we will install the no left turn sign on the south side of Menor Avenue as requested. We would just like the location to be designated by the city because it's tight in that area with Zappy's Car Wash and such. And finally, the right in, right out island curbing, we will modify the detail on that so that it is mountable. The request to add bollards adjacent to the drive-through lane is something we feel is excessive in this application. Cars have 26.5 feet in the driveway to back out if they're parked on the far west side, to back out before they reach a 6-inch curb with a 2-foot island that buffers the drive-through lane. So I don't know the spacing requirements that the city had in mind relative to that comment on the staff report, but we feel it would be visually harsh and excessive, considering cars would have 28.5 feet to navigate and get turned around into the drive aisle. We're not looking to split hairs over it, but if anything, we would like to limit it to 2 to 3. You know, the 3 fast food establishments at Diamond Center have similar sites with immediate adjacent pull-in parking, and none of them have bollards nor any type of buffer along the drive-through lane. So our current plan.
Hopefully we get a little smarter as time passes.
Well, and that's why we have the 2-foot raised island that's cement on the plan to buffer and delineate that drive lane.
Okay. The reason we're doing 3 and 4 together are the fact that they're companion pieces, so we can discuss them all at one time. So any questions for commissioners for the applicant or the administration?
Chair, I just had a question. Can you walk me through, as the cars go around, where the menu board is, where they place their order, and then where they pick up their order? Can you show me on?
Exact layout remains unknown because we're talking to a number of prospective tenants, and they each have their own specifications. The general prototype is for there to be one pre-order sign, which is usually small, a couple feet wide, and then there's a speaker board where you place your order with the order menu as part of it. So there would be two signs in the back, but right now we do not have the exact layout or dimensions. But a total of 2 to 3 signs would be placed on the north elevation.
So they would only be along the back or the north elevation?
That's correct.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, I got something here. I know when you try to enter in here now, it's a unique area to get into. And I can see people coming through this drive-through and wanting to make a right turn to go westbound on 20. And they're going to have to swing out to make that long right turn radius. And you might have some issues with the westbound traffic coming in.
I don't follow you.
So a car's traveling west on 20, and they want to come in here, so they're going to use this.
Way out, or can they make that turn okay?
Can they make that radius turn around?
Here's our,
Because people aren't going to want to go back to Heisley to try to make a left turn on Heisley.
west.
Right, they're not going to want to go to Heisley, make a left turn on Heisley, and then try to get over to the westbound lane of Heisley in order to make a right turn on 20 to go westbound again. So I see that's going to be a jam up right there, that when, somebody's there, they got their coffee in their hand, they got a donut in their, and they got to make that long radius turn, and now you got oncoming traffic coming in now at you.
Well, that's an 18-foot wide drive. What do you think would be
I think to get
challenging about
around that island, they're going to curb. They're going to be nervous to curb their tires on that, and they're going to want to make a long radius right turn around that. And that might impede in that incoming drive-through traffic coming off 20.
We can certainly soften the radius in that location, sure.
'Cause this isn't easy to get around the way it is now.
1 second, I need you to identify yourself for the clerk, please.
I'm sorry, Rich Cantanzariti, Land Design Consultants.
So we're happy to do that, because that'd give 3 or 4 more feet, and also visually, make it look a lot easier.
Would you identify yourself for the clerk, please?
I'm Rick Ferris from Ashley Point.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Varga?
I agree with the comment about the radius. You're going 180 degrees in direction, and you have one radius, which is the most of it, which is probably fine, but it's that first section of radius that's too tight, and drivers are going to be all over the place. I have a question that I don't quite understand what it is. It looks like where the service window is, there's a dimension, an area it's 4 feet by 12 feet, and it protrudes off the building. Is that actually a part of the building that protrudes out? That's the service, okay.
Correct.
I would strongly recommend, though it's not stated here, that be protected with bollards. That's almost a necessity, that you protect that from
I
people
agree.
driving into your service window area, and that's pretty common throughout all the industry, that you protect your service windows with bollards. Otherwise, it gets to be a problem.
Makes sense.
And we're still, just to verify, because this was an earlier comment, and I think you've got it, but I'm just looking to verify, that the patio area on the west side, there's still a fence or a railing that keeps anyone from stepping off the west end of that patio into the service lane.
I think we have to come back with details on that, because we don't have the furniture details and whatnot.
Okay, but I mean, just in terms of I'm more concerned about the safety with the vehicles cutting that corner right there, is that you have a blind corner, and I just want to reiterate our requirement that you don't have people stepping off that patio to the west.
Okay.
Anything else? No. Any other questions? Any comments, Kathy, from the administration?
Just to add that the administration spoke extensively internally with concerns about circulation, and that's one of the reasons why we recommended a couple of the additional items, specifically the stop bar and the sign, which might address in part Mr. Cook's concerns. The hope is that when folks are heading towards, that exit to go westbound on Menor Avenue, they will stop, recognize any incoming traffic. It is a tough circulation pattern right there. That's why we also suggested, and the applicant agreed, to add a stop bar and sign at the end of the parking aisle adjacent to the last parking spaces there to the east. That will help. The one concern maybe with shaving off that island too much is making sure that doesn't prompt a car from wanting to go eastbound on Menor Avenue, because you're cutting off that island too much. So that would be the only thing that we might want to take into consideration.
Let me ask a question. I know Mr. Varga has another question. Is that pork chop designated to be where it is? I mean, where the turning movements are now?
Is
I
that-
mean, could it be slid a little bit to the east?
We talked about that too, as far as, that's,
I
How
don't
different of
know
it is it
what
from
the arrangement
existing?
is with the shopping center, but could you push that a little to the east?
They want to push the pork chop.
Yeah,
further
I don't
to
know
the
what
east.
utilities are there and whatnot in terms
Oh, yeah,
of poles or,
like
I mean, it's,
I just don't know, undergrounds.
there's a pole there, there's a, what is that?
retaining walls.
Little retaining wall. I mean, it could be,
We
it
could
could be
look,
shifted a little bit.
I mean, that might be a possible solution, but you'll have to deal with that.
Right now, that incoming lane is in line with the existing drive aisle along that last row of parking.
Right.
If you shift it too much, you're still going to have an issue with incoming traffic being too far over. It's tough.
Just a thought.
I know, I'm just saying it, we did look at that as well,
Okay.
but moving it back and forth too, internally.
Mr. Varga, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I have just two things clarifications, I guess. Will there be a sign on the south side of Menor Avenue that says no left turn for west or for eastbound traffic?
That was part of the recommendation, I believe.
Okay, so there will be that sign, because that will at least keep people from trying to cut across the turning lane and everything else that's there. And then there is a sign in the plan that I don't understand. If you look at the entrance from the east turning in, there's a note that says sidewalk replacement, and then immediately to the left of that, there's a no left turn sign for incoming traffic.
It's,
How did?
it's for outgoing traffic, yeah.
But no, there's one over there too. But this is right at the right-hand side, where you, as you're just pulling into that lane, it says no right-hand turn. That doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
No left.
Left turn.
I'm sorry, no left-hand turn.
So it's a no left turn.
As you're coming in, how do you get to the parking spaces and
Oh,
I
that,
think that
okay.
was probably intended for across Menor Avenue.
yeah,
I
I'm
think
sorry,
it
it's
was.
left-hand,
Yeah, I
you're
think
right.
it
No
was.
left-hand turn,
Yep.
but that's where people want to go.
Maybe that's the first
It's-
sign you were talking about that actually faces,
Well, that actually faces westbound traffic as you're approaching the pork chop, as you're approaching the drive-in. There's a sign that immediately says you can't turn left. That's going to just get confusing as heck, right? I mean, there's a point where if there's enough signs,
Right.
people won't know where they're going.
By mistake.
That's a you
That's a
think that's a
mistake.
mistake?
It's a
Okay,
right-
no, that's fine.
it's a right- yeah,
It did
definitely a
make
right in,
sense,
right
and I just
only
wanted to
drive.
clarify that. But I do want the one on the other side, the south side of the street, because, very good,
Okay.
that's it, that's all.
Mr. Sidoti?
Say I'm in the drive-through, I'm heading towards the service window, and I decide that I want to exit for whatever reason. So I pull out there on the west side and I start exiting, heading south. You have a directional arrow allowing traffic to go north. Doesn't that create a potential dangerous situation if I pull out and I start heading south and somebody's coming around that corner?
so you're talking about the back of the building?
No, I'm
Right
talking,
there?
Right here.
I'm talking about on the west side of the building. I'm in the drive-through.
Okay.
And I decide to exit for whatever reason, so I pull out and I shoot south,
South.
so I can make a left to go over to the Menor axis to make a right. But you have a directional arrow, which is telling me cars can come down this way and go along the side of the west part of the building. I mean, can't create a dangerous situation.
I think that arrow would indicate that you need to yield because there's traffic coming the other direction.
Yeah, provided I see it and provided I'm paying attention, I'm not playing with, I'm not on the phone, which a lot of people are. I just think
Not snowing?
that's a potential hazardous situation. I mean, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. Somebody's gonna be coming around, somebody's gonna pull out of the lane, and boom, they're gonna be facing each other. They may not necessarily hit, but they're gonna be facing each other. Just the circulation, just odd
That's
there.
where they've already ordered. They haven't yet picked up. Because if they're on that side of the building, they've already ordered.
Sure, all right, well,
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I understand, yeah.
If they're going to bail, they'll bail out at the north end and turn north. All right.
Okay, anything else? Any comments from the administration? No? Okay. Any additional comments, questions from the commission? I'll entertain a motion. We want to change it to the staff exhibit on the islands that were installed, correct?
Well, did you send this revised plan?
Don't we?
We gave you this.
Yes.
Kathy? I'm sorry. We gave you our most revised plan, right?
Yes, the commission should have received this evening the revised plan which matches the staff exhibit.
Okay, so we're good there. So you agree to that? And you agree to the conditions that are in the staff report?
Yes, with the exception of the number of bollards, because it wasn't specified.
Larry, how do we identify the number of bollards? It's in the
Like
code, isn't
to
it?
Forego having bollards there, considering we have a 6-inch high, 2-foot wide.
We have people in the city that drive across pork chops, so we know that that's not always a deterrent. Do you have a comment?
Bollards along the drive-through are not a requirement. They were a recommendation.
Okay.
So that's at your discretion. The ones around the patio were.
Okay. So you agree to the ones on the patio side? You don't agree to the ones on the drive-through side?
We agree with the drive-through side protecting the bump out from the building, the drive-through window.
Okay.
Oh, that's a new thing. Right.
That was brought up this evening. But we would like to forego the recommendation for the bollards to be placed inside of the concrete, the 2-foot wide concrete island immediately adjacent
Okay,
to the
how
drive-through.
about if we do this? How about if we say we'll forego that until we have a problem, and then if we do have problems that occur, then you'll put them in?
Okay, fair enough,
Is that fair enough?
yes.
Understand.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'll entertain a motion. We're talking about the drive-through at this point. Anybody at all?
I'll make the motion, but with the change on the exit, with the change in the radius.
Okay,
Yep. We've agreed to that, so.
And then another one would be the signage changes. The sign that's wrong and the one that's on the south side of the street.
Is that a sentence?
Put it in the form of a sentence.
I don't know if we're allowed to put in a sign on the south side of the street.
Well, that's
Who would
why I
be-
said at the city's, the
Who-
city
who would
will
be
designate the
responsible?
location. I was looking for a good place and was a little confused because it's pretty tight with the entrances to Zappy's Car Wash and their signage.
Chairman.
so-
I have a picture.
Signage in the right-of-way, particularly for traffic signage, has to conform to our ODOT specifications. So if once we start deciding where, a directional sign needs to go in the right-of-way, I think the planning commission that's an administrative function. And again, we have to comply with ODOT standards on that. So appropriate signage designating that as not appropriate for a left-hand turn for eastbound traffic on Route 20 will be located, again, wherever the manual says it needs to go. So I think that's an item that the commission
not a
can
condition.
forego. Correct.
And we'll withdraw the signage.
You'll agree to that. Well, however, to determine where it goes is where it goes. Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, it is a condition that the traffic engineer already commented on. So it is part of the staff report.
Okay. So we don't need it.
Okay. So, Mr. Cook, does that satisfy your,
Yeah.
okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Jess, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Tiedemann?
Yes.
Mr. Varga?
Yes.
Mr. Cicero?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic?
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Snow?
Yes. So now we're going to talk about the patio.
Actually, we would like to table that because we do not have the details that have been
Okay.
requested relative to the furniture and the layout and the number of seating. So I
Is there a
think we're a
motion?
little premature there, and
Okay. Is there a motion to table?
Motion to table the outdoor patio.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Jess, when you're ready.
Mr. Tiedemann?
Yes.
Mr. Varga?
Yes.
Mr. Cicero?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic?
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Snow?
Yes. How about item 5? You prepared to go along with item 5? Okay. Item 5, architectural review, reimaging a commercial building at 9377 Menor Avenue.
I'm Dusan Bocek, I'm with Richmond Architects. Testifying to the architecture of each of them.
A little louder if you don't mind.
we have presented elevation renderings and a space layout plan to accommodate the 3 to 4 tenants proposed to be in the building. The overall color scheme is earth-toned, and the materials introduced include a mix of textures using faux stone, tile with a wood grain look, and ephes across the entire south facade facing Menor Avenue, as well as wrapping the east and west elevations 30 feet deep. We feel the proposed improvements are a significant upgrade to what currently exists, which is gray, white, and red, ephes and split-face block. The existing center peak of the building was removed, and we reworked the columns for vertical extension using stone to create storefronts for the 3 to 4 tenants with individual signage bands. On the east elevation, we propose to add 30 feet of storefront glass topped with wood-grained cement board in a warm brown color. And on the west elevation, we propose to add 12 feet of glass system as well as the 4-foot by 12-foot bump out for the drive-through pickup window, also topped with the 30 feet deep of wood-grained feature above it. The split-face block remaining on the side elevations as well as that on the rear is being recolored to tan with a gray bottom border. And the city has made some recommendations that we're in agreement with, one of which is to infill. This is the existing side door and transom. And we will infill that with masonry to match the wall as per the city recommendation. And we will also agree to wrap the rear corners of the building with the wood grain cement board at least 6 feet wide on both sides of each corner as suggested. Lastly, the third item that we would like to discuss alternative options on is the extension of the parapet wall on the rear of the building. It is a rather prohibitive and major request for a number of reasons. Primarily, the rear wall is not constructed to support a 4 to 6 foot high parapet wall extension. That would require significant engineering and structural changes, which would be extremely expensive and north of $150,000. That would take into account, engineering and structural upgrades for the additional snow load, drainage. The roof would have to be redesigned to handle drainage, and we would like to propose screening, which was the reason behind the recommendation to add to the parapet wall in the back. We would like to propose metal slat type screening around the HVAC units, which would be painted to match the building. There are currently 2 HVAC units. They're 10 tons each. We would be adding 2 additional units, so there would be a total of 4. We're open to options, but increasing or continuing that parapet wall along that north elevation would be a huge cost burden that right now the budget just can't allow.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant or the administration? Mr. Traub, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The ultimate goal of raising the parapet is primarily to screen the roof-mounted HVAC units. If there is an alternative, the administration is certainly open to that. The verbal description that you provided, I'm not sure that would, unless you can cite an example in the field in Menor as an example, I'm not sure that would meet the spirit of what we're trying to achieve. What I would suggest would be to take a look at the Boston Market or the recently completed Lake Health facility as examples of successful screening of roof-mounted HVAC units. and that would satisfy, I think, the administration's concerns.
Okay.
We're open to doing that, so we will do that.
We could come up with some more proposals for screening and work with the staff to get that done. We agree in principle that we'll somehow screen the equipment up
Well,
on the
it's a
roof.
code requirement that this stuff be screened, so there needs to be a reasonable solution to it.
Understand?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Varga.
Could you explain, didn't quite understand, and I just, for my own edification, want to understand, you're also going to put the horizontal slatted, or the wood look slats in the back of the building too?
Per the staff recommendation.
Do we know where that's going to go, on the corners? When you said the corners, are you talking about the same height and width, height of how it appears in the front? And you're going to put it in the back too?
Yes.
I believe the staff made some recommendations. They didn't identify exactly the length on the two corners, but again,
That would only be on the sides because there's no wall to put it on in the back. You have a gutter system, a flat roof going to a gutter in the back, so I don't know that.
That's why
That
they
is
only
correct.
recommended the 6 feet, to wrap up to 6 feet along the rear wall, again, just to add a structural element to the rear wall. It's exposed, and we wanted to carry that wood siding around the 4 walls, not just the 3.
if we come up with an alternate to screen all the equipment, would you accept that design element to be only on the 2 sides and not on the rear also?
Because I'm trying to picture what that looks like too. And, I don't know that,
I think probably what we should do here is hold off on the architectural approval here till we see what that's actually going to look like. You know, I don't want to get into a negotiation here tonight on 2 sides versus the rear versus 2 sides and 6 feet versus whatever. I mean, I think we need to see what it's going to really look like before we make a vote on it.
I would like to say that I think what you're trying to do in the front is a very reasonable thing to do for an existing building, to upgrade the appearance. The addition of the stone, the full-height columns, I think that's pretty reasonable. You might want to think about the signage. It almost becomes a design element the way it's shown here, but signage is a different process, but you might want to standardize the signage so that it has the effect that you want it to have.
So can we table that tonight,
Just the architectural.
the architectural approval?
Yes.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
Motion to table the architectural component as discussed in item 5 in tonight's agenda.
Second.
Mr. Zeman, does that count the way we said it?
There was a motion to table item number 5.
Oh, no, we're tabling the architectural component.
Architectural component as described in item number 5 on tonight's
Yeah,
agenda.
agenda item 5 is being tabled. Yeah, that's pretty clear. Yeah,
Okay. Want to get it right.
got it right.
Okay,
Right.
good. Is there a second, Jess?
Yes, there was.
Okay, call the roll, please.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yes.
Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
Mr. Snow.
Yes. Okay, we'll see you back with those other, the item that was earlier tabled on the patio and this item.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Ron, thank you for the examples for screening. So we'll
Final site plan architecture review of commercial building at the car wash at 8600 Manor Avenue.
Nice. You can't tell they're up there.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having us. Glenn Mons with Cardinal Auto Wash. Here to produce the final architecture site plan for Cardinal Auto Wash. Currently, right now, this is the picture that we provided you in the preliminary site plan with the siding, the stone, and the metal roofing. Per the staff report, there were some things that were brought out as a concern. We have some alternatives to discuss tonight with the roofing. I did speak to Kathy about the metal roof we're going to go ahead and transfer over to an asphalt shingle per the recommendations from the city. I was unable to get a actual copy of the shingle since the builder did not have it with him. I have a picture, so I can produce that for you for what we're looking at for the architectural for that. As well as, I know the stone was also a concern, so we would like to bring some options to the table for the stone itself.
So what are you thinking about as options for the stone?
So I know the stone was something that was brought to the concern. I talked to Larry about this. So this was basically the stone that we were looking to use. Actually, I'll put it up here. The stone that we were looking to use originally. I talked to during the week. There was an option to either do a split face block, possibly, or a brick. I would like to present the split face block in the color of gray. With the brick, with the drive-through beverage up front, we would like to make those match as much as possible. And for us to put brick up front on the drive-through, we have to redo the footers on that to make sure the brick had something solid to be on. The building up front is already a split face block. So speaking with Larry, we can either try to match the split face that is up there with a gray, like a paint or a stain, to make it match the split face on the back building. So that is the option that we would like to go with if the stone is something that the Planning Commission would not like to see.
Okay. Any thoughts from the administration on that?
I know you've been concerned about going back and forth. I think we actually like the initial proposal of that stone there on the left. I think that would look nice. The administration would be fine with that.
Okay.
So you want to keep the stone?
I am more than willing to keep the stone if you'll let me keep the stone.
Okay. Commission members, any comments?
Initially, I said I liked what you were doing with this building, and I still do. And I do prefer the stone on the left rather than split face or any of it going in that direction. It has a lot more character, and I think it would be nicer to look at. What I'm trying, and I think I need some ruling here too. One of the comments of the staff report was that you're going to improve the building in the front, right? And I see that there's this memo that kind of delineates that, but we actually have to see what it looks like. I mean, whatever your proposal is, if this is the proposal, we'd like to see a drawing, or, you've got a nice drawing of the building in the back. It would be great to see the building in the front with the improvements so that we can see the two buildings together to see where this is going, okay?
Okay.
So I know it's another expense, and I know exactly what that means, but it's hard to just read this and to know how the proportions and the colors and the position of these two buildings work together without seeing them together, So everything you're doing with the new building, great, fine, you know what to do. But this part of the approval, and again, we can approve the new building but hold off on the approval of the renovation of the building in the front? Can we do that?
Sure.
Get his attention.
Looking for concurrence
I
from the
want
legal
a ruling
department.
here. Can we approve this building, the new building, with the materials and the presentation that we have, but hold off on the approval of the renovation of the building in the front?
Yes, I think that that kind of got somewhat ahead of itself. I know it first came up in some discussions regarding this new car wash structure, and I think the applicants then said, yeah, and there was some intention to make some changes to that front building as well. That's really never been the subject of commission review so far, and so I don't necessarily know that there's something in front of you to act upon. I understand that there was a submission, but again, I would prefer, and I think that the code would require a separate application that's a freestanding structure. It may be on the same parcel at this point, but I think a separate application, if necessary, depending on the nature of the changes. Some of the changes may be subject to administrative review and approval, and the Planning Commission, per code, would never see it. If the changes are such that it would be proper for Planning Commission review and approval, I think a separate application, together with the appropriate submissions, would be necessary at that time.
I mean, I think an architectural review of the renovated appearance of the building in the front is appropriate.
So, and it may be required per code, but again, it may be a situation due to the fact that it's an existing building based on its square footage that the administration would have the authority, if it exercised it, to approve it as well.
Okay.
So I'm saying that it could take two different tracks depending on the nature of the proposal.
Well, and we did bring it up, when you were here before, we did bring it up, and I think I leveraged my comments as much as possible to suggest that you include the renovation of the building in the front as part of this project.
Correct, yeah, and that's why, after doing this, I submitted that as what we were looking to do. I have no problem going back through and submitting it through the whole process for the front building.
All right. So we're limiting our response right now to the building in the
To
back.
the car wash.
To the car wash only, but with the requirement that the city may have to make a presentation on the renovation of the building on the front.
Okay. Is that a motion?
Well, yes, it's a motion to only review this building and not the building in the front.
And that includes the shingle, the new shingled roof, and the stone.
And the stone.
The stone as was presented.
That is correct, yes, the front building will be 100%
Separate.
identical to
Okay.
that.
Now, at one time, we talked about the garage doors.
That is correct.
Where does that sit?
We went, so with the garage doors, I mean, we would like to stay with the glass if possible. Looking through our options for garage doors that are 12 by 10, we were falling, the commercial doors that were available to us at the time were either all white or very little windows. We went back and looked at the residential side of it to have more of a carriage style type door for the commercial. We were very limited on the window selection that we can have and how much light would come through those doors. So at the point, we would like to stick with the glass doors, like the fire department across the street has, if we can.
Okay. Was that a motion you made before?
Which, about the doors?
No, about the building.
Yeah, I made a motion that
Okay.
we
I need a second.
we
Was there a second?
limit our approval to this building as presented.
To the car wash.
Yeah, to the car wash only. I need a second.
A second.
Now, Jess.
Mr. Tiedemann. Mr. Varga.
Yes.
Mr. Cicero.
Yes.
Mr. Cook.
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic.
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti.
Yes.
With the
Mr. Snow.
single- With the shingled roof and the stone
And glass doors.
and the glass doors.
Okay.
And then you'll come back subsequent meeting with the front building,
Yeah, if I can get it done, I'll be back next.
post haste.
Sorry.
Call the roll.
I think so, yeah.
You vote?
We voted.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Checking on you. I know it's your birthday yesterday and stuff.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, item 7, informal rezoning of 13.67 acres, Menor Avenue. Is that applicant here? Okay, give us an overview of what you want to do at that location.
Sure. Good evening. I'm Rob Jack with Clover Development, and we are proposing to rezone about 9.7 acres at 7171 Menor Avenue. This is next to Queensdale Apartments. Rezone it to B2 for senior independent living facility. It would be a 3-story, 119-unit facility with 121 parking spaces. It would be a market rate property, not subsidized in any way, full property tax, et cetera. It's basically an independent living facility for seniors in the area. Basically, we draw
So
within a-
is it more of an apartment facility then? Is that what you're talking about?
It's similar. Each unit has a kitchen, washer, dryer, and so forth, yes.
Okay. Any comments from the administration?
I don't have any comment.
Mr. Traub?
I think the administration pointed out in the staff report the question that we had as to whether this met the definition of an independent living development. And I think there is some subjectivity to this, and the applicant, and I apologize for not including it in the packet, but you'll note the date on it was just sent to us yesterday. They do attempt to outline how, from their perspective, they feel that it meets the definition of independent living development. And I don't know if you want to take a moment to look at those criteria and make a determination or not. You'll note that based on the information that the administration initially had, that we suggested that perhaps an R10 rezoning would be more appropriate. But I would just remind the commission this is an informal, and to the extent that there are questions relative to services, those can certainly be flushed out over the course of the formal rezoning. Thank you, gentlemen.
Mr. Chairman. Again, it is informal, so I think it's premature to actually take any type of action tonight, determining any issues one way or another. Obviously, this is to provide the applicant feedback. As Mr. Traub indicated, we've provided feedback, but we do not opine that this proposed use fits the code's definition of an independent living development, and that's why they were steered towards perhaps looking at it as an R10 if they choose to go with an age-restricted apartment community. Thank you.
Any comments back?
I mean, we'd certainly, our preference is to pursue independent living in the B2 zone versus the R10. The R10 significantly increases parking demand, or parking requirements, has minimum lot sizes that we don't necessarily comply with, and, you know, just believe that the independent living would be viewed as a little better than an apartment complex.
Commission members, any questions for the applicant?
I have a question.
Go right ahead.
Just so that I understand, there was this plan submitted here. There's a blue line, and I'm trying to understand the blue line. Is that the parcel that's being asked for?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
It's made up of two parcels, and then there are, the underlying zoning lines are on there in black as well.
It looks to me, and again, this is just a question for clarification, it looks to me as though the blue line has extended into what used to be the property of the housing development to the east, to the extent that at some point that blue line is almost just 20 feet from a building. Up in that area right there. I mean, it's like, why is that blue line being shifted into the property next door? Is there a minimum requirement for square footage or something? I mean, I don't understand why it's doing what it's doing. There is a property line there already, it looks like.
Right, it's the property.
And the blue line, and then it goes all the way behind the adjacent property. Is there a reason for that?
It's the property line.
That's the boundary.
That is what the current property line is now?
Yeah, it's an irregularly shaped parcel.
Yes, it is. I was thinking that maybe you were asking for this
Oh, no.
property line to be like this.
No,
All right,
no, that's
Then
the
that's
parcel.
part of the clarification.
Yeah.
And just for my own statement of opinion, is that I think you would have to increase some of the amenities, even with this list of items that was presented to us.
Okay.
My opinion is you'd have to, well, for instance, let me just ask a question here. There's a number of things suggesting that there be a central party room or something like that. Does that mean that there would be a kitchen facility associated with that?
There is a kitchen facility associated with it. We do not prepare meals on a regular basis from that kitchen. That kitchen would be used for parties and events, social activities.
I guess when I go look at the list, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, I'm just trying to understand what you're proposing, and what my thought is that you could do all of these things that are listed here at a regular apartment complex that had a community, had a central facility, a party room or something like that. So I don't know if this is completely addressing, in my mind, the independent living definition that's in the code.
Yeah, so the four things that are mentioned in the code are meals, housekeeping, social activities, and transportation. And while we don't provide meals necessarily, we do coordinate Meals on Wheels service for some of our residents.
But that's a service that could come and go. It wouldn't be inherent to the.
Right, that's third party, that's right. We do have extensive social activities that would not be common in an apartment complex. We have an on-site activities director, we have fitness classes, we have in-house worship services, Bible study, beauty salon, we have special events, parties, holiday parties, and other activities that.
My point of sensitivity is that these are programs that could come and go, that you could have them and not have them. I'm just looking at the part of the code that's looking for the actual physical development of the facility that would augment the building physically.
Well, and social activities is one of the, one of those criteria. I guess I'm just
Yeah,
trying to
but I mean,
outline that.
would there be an actual workouts room space?
Yes.
In this facility?
That's correct.
Okay, well, that's worth knowing.
Okay.
See, I think one of the keys of an independent living is the meals. I think having a third party bring meals back and forth, to me, that doesn't fit, to me, the definition of an independent living development. Providing meals there on site
Yeah.
feels to me to be key to the code differentiation.
Right, and most of our residents are independent, I mean, by nature, by definition. So they are preparing meals on their own. The third party, the Meals on Wheels, would be for, just a handful of the residents. They couldn't do that on their own. This is kind of a step before assisted living, I guess, is what my
It
point
just
is.
feels like we're between.
So let me ask you this, do you operate a facility similar to this anywhere else?
Yes, we have 6 operating in the Cleveland area right now.
And where's the closest one?
Willoughby Hills.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
At the Willoughby Hills location, you do meals the same way you're proposing here?
Yes. Yeah, the tenants basically prepare their own, correct.
So you have an option on the property, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Commissioners, any other questions for the applicant? Hearing-
I just,
Go ahead,
maybe
Mr. Varga.
just to ask a question. With the remaining portion of the property, are you going to do any site development that would also augment the lifestyle of the folks who are living here? I mean, because of such an awkward piece of property, on the other hand, there's property that doesn't have any real functional use unless you put it to some use.
Right. There may be an opportunity out along the frontage. We don't have any immediate plans to do anything.
I'm talking about like nature trails or walkways.
I'm sorry.
Or stuff like that on the bulk of the property that's not being consumed by the
We would
building
have
and
an outdoor
parking.
space adjacent to the community room, but no trails. Nothing of that nature.
Okay.
Okay. I think you can go now. It's an informal rezoning, so
Yes.
there's no vote taken on
I
our part
understand.
tonight, so.
Okay. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Final site plan architectural review of a restaurant at 83 Tyler Boulevard. You're back for another session, huh?
Yep. Did you want me to go over?
Go ahead, you go
Okay.
right ahead.
Great. So this looks very similar to the last Taco Bell that we brought through, and this site was already brought through once. It is located on an outlot of the new shopping center that's located on the corner of Tyler and Center. And this will be what's called Outlot 3 on that overall property. We're only showing you just the Taco Bell portion of this. Some things to note is we do not have direct access onto Tyler or to Center. We only have access through the actual shopping center. So there's 3 points of access to the shopping center. One is directly adjacent to us. It's actually within our property limits. And then from there, they can get to our property. Some other things to note is that during the last time we were here talking about this project, we got approval for the patio and the drive-through use. Staff did provide comments for us, and I can go over those and how we can address them. All the ones from engineering and traffic, those aren't a problem. We will make sure those get adjusted, and I'll just skip right down to the conditions. Number one is just to respond to the comments from the engineer and the fire department. We can do that. The second one is the trash enclosure is within the water line. And I have the utility plan here that I can show you. So here is the dumpster. And this part here is the dumpster while this is just the pad. And the water line crosses over the pad. This water line is not for domestic use. It is only for service of the fire hydrant over here. This easement, though, does cross over into the small corner of our dumpster enclosure. So we will work with Aqua Water to make sure that's okay with them. We might have to rotate our dumpster a little bit to accommodate them, but we'll let you know how that outcome is. The next item is to shift the handicap parking spaces to the north. And I don't know if we will do that, and I will explain that situation here too. So this is our side entry. It's a vestibule with a door here and a door here. And this is our front entry door with a patio. Our ADA accessible doors are 1, 2, and 3. This back door is just a service door. So with our ADA stalls here, they're centered in between the front door and the side door and also have patio access. We could maybe shift them up one space, but if we put it directly across this door, then there's no way to get them into the door. So we will likely keep them where they are, but we'll look to shift them up a little bit if that's what the goal is of that.
Okay. Since the administration recommended that, any comments from the administration?
Not on that item, no.
Okay.
The next item is the on-site circulation, and that discusses this dead end down here. And right now we just have a 5-foot striped area, but we will increase this area by shifting all the parking upwards. And we will then make this a full-size parking stall that people can turn around in. Number 5 talks about the elevations. And basically what it wants is this rear elevation faces this way and faces the overall shopping center. So it's asking for another tower, which we can put right here, which will also be visible on this side. So we'll square off. This is just a freezer cooler. We'll square this off, add a tower. The tower will be made of the same material as the tower in the front. And that is the Core 10 metal that we used on the last one. We do have all the samples here if you guys want to see those. With that though, the tower, we will put signage on the back of the building and on this side. So there'll be signage on all 4 sides. Number 6 is the patio area shall be protected, and that is with a fence and also with bollards. It's not a problem to put up bollards. And just so you know, our patio furniture is a bench with a back to it, and on the back is a railing. So it won't prevent cars from coming through with that railing, but it does fence in the area, and then the bollards would protect. We can add both of those. 7 is the landscape plan, and it talks about adding a few trees here. And it wants another tree on this spot here, so we can add that in line. And then it talks about adding trees or shrubs to this landscape island that was added. So we can do those. And the last one is number 8, a photometric plan, and ours was calculated in foot candles, so we'll make sure it's calculated in lux and it's within city code.
Any comments from the administration, Kathy?
I think we just want to emphasize the concern that was raised in item condition 4 with regard to the traffic dead end situation that's being created at that corner. While we recognize that the one suggestion was the no parking sign, I believe one of the other alternatives was one-way traffic circulation on the site. To know how the commission felt about that. Obviously, that's a little bit more of a dramatic change than what's currently proposed. The concern, of course, is we don't want to have anybody backing up once they realize that they can't go around the building. So that was why we raised that condition and considered the alternative of one-way traffic circulation throughout the entire site.
Any rebuttal?
This site isn't really set up well for one-way traffic. To do one-way traffic, it would funnel everyone through the drive-through lane to then come around and park and exit. We do have, and it might just not be visible, a stop bar right here, and we can have stop signs. And then with the added turnaround spot, we feel that that would be sufficient. But one-way traffic really isn't an option. And also with the way that the 90-degree parking is, angled parking would work better for single traffic paths.
Yes, I have a comment. I have a question first for the city. Has the fire marshal signed off on this vehicle circulation plan?
They have.
They have. So he thinks he can get his truck around here, huh? Okay. It looks a little problematic to me, but if he signed off, that's his business. Our couple comments. Based on the architectural plan that you've given us, the plan shows the cooler and the freezer much larger in plan than it is shown on all the elevations. In fact, on the west or east side, it's flush, and on the west side, it's just a small indentation. When you look at the elevations, there's a number of feet that's been reduced. So which is the proper?
It's this one here that's squared off. and
Completely
that-
squared off.
Yep, and that takes into account putting on that tower then.
Okay. What I would suggest, again, I realize the city's asked for something, but from an architectural point of view, when you approach this building, the tower would be nice. I'd like to see, at least on the upper portion of this, some of that horizontal banding.
Oh, the two different colors of brick, is that what you're talking about?
No, the actual material you have on the front of the building next to the tower, all of that.
This.
If you could incorporate some of that at the top of the wall, at the back, with the tower, it would start to create the same language as you have on the front. We talked about this earlier on, that this building literally, from a center point of view, has two fronts, two elevations that are important to us.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't want the one on the street to look like the back of the building, but we still now have the back of the building facing the center. And I'd like to see that dressed up. I really appreciate the comments that the city made about introducing that vertical element. I'd like to see you introduce that horizontal component too, being that the building is now flush across the back and the sidewalls, that you could incorporate some of that there too. Is there any way to shield the relatively large electrical service that's on the back of the building? The back/front of the building?
I believe that there is landscaping back there, so it would all be screened through that.
I kind of looked at the landscaping plan. I don't think it was, I don't know that it's going to take care, that electrical service is right next to a parking space.
Oh, it's adjacent to the sidewalk, I
Right.
see.
And then, let me get it out of my mind so we can address all of it. You also, right next to the drive-in lane, you have what looks like a surface-mounted electrical transformer that's not shielded by anything. It's close to where the menu board is.
Mm-hmm.
There's no landscaping immediately around it, because I know that they don't like to put landscaping around the transformers, but it's right there sitting out in the middle of nowhere, right as you enter the building. You drive up to the facility. So what I'm asking is, can you shield that transformer somehow? Even if it's not shielded with landscaping, because they don't like landscaping, because it becomes a maintenance problem, can you put some of the horizontal, can you create a physical enclosure around that in some fashion? So you're not driving up and looking directly out of your window into the side of a transformer.
To put a physical shield, that would be up to the electric company. I don't know if they like those kind of barriers, that's something else they have to get around to service it. But as for landscaping shield, there is quite a bit of landscaping all around the other sides of it, not the front, but all the other sides. There is the menu board that's right here. So as you drive through the drive-through, you're not gonna see that transformer because the menu board is directly in front of you.
But does the menu board go all the way down to the ground?
It's, I think, 2 feet off the ground, just enough for
well-
snow clearance.
I guess all I'm throwing out there is, can you consider doing something so that the first thing you see at your facility, well, that's the second thing. I'll talk about the first thing in a minute. The second thing is this large transformer and the electrical service on the back of the building. I would like you to try to make, with the comments that the city made and what I'm making, introduce some of the materials that are on the front of the building, on the other front of the building.
I would have to talk to corporate about adding, we call this the slat wall.
Yes, right.
To the back of the building.
Well,
I've asked for that before on another recent project. And they did not feel that just putting the slat wall in the back matched their brand. They had a lot more comments on the overall building to make it more uniform. So I would have to see which way they would want to go. Really, with the 2 different color bricks and then the EFIS band around the top, and then the Core 10 tower with the signage, it will really sharpen up that whole backside. It will make it look really well. And I think that the horizontal with the EFIS and then the 2 different bricks will look nice. We can figure out what to do with the electrical panels, and maybe I'll see if maybe we can shift them, or because then they could be screened by landscaping if they move down to here, because this is where the landscaping would be. So I can find out if that's a possibility. But there is this downspout on the building, and that's just a function of the building that needs
I
to
don't have a
happen.
problem with the downspout. I just have a problem with that's clearly the back of the building, and way back at the beginning, we asked that both elevations be treated as fronts of the building. And you've achieved that on the one side, on the south side, but this is not achieved on the north side. The request by the city, I think, is very good, and your response to that is good. I think a little more needs to be done to dress it up. I just still think it still looks like the service end of the building, which it is. I understand the reality of it, but I'd like to see the same materials on the front of the building as on the other front of the building, so that it's recognized as being more than just the service end of the building.
And just one more thing to note about this slat wall and how it does turn the corner.
Yeah.
It makes it difficult to put that on the back, because now it turns the corner onto the drive-through side, and that's the problem that brand has with it, that now you've got slat wall over here and it doesn't really match.
I
It
understand.
doesn't look well.
I
So
understand, but I'm still asking for the building to be improved on the north elevation.
I'll
the
see what brand
comments that
can
I've
do,
made.
but I just wanted to let you know the comments we got
Sure.
back from them
Sure.
regarding that.
One last thing. Obviously, the very first thing you see about this building is the trash enclosure. We've asked many times, and sometimes we get and sometimes we don't get, but we require that those all be self-closing doors. And though it doesn't say that on the plan, we want those doors, those gates to be self-closing doors. So at no time, those doors can be left open.
Spring-loaded.
Spring-loaded, mechanically such that they close by themselves and they stay closed. And since that's the very first thing you see, I'd make sure that enclosure is as attractive an enclosure as you can try to do, because that's what you see. 100% of your customers drive past that first. So I would even suggest maybe you think a little out of the box as to how that gets improved a little bit.
And last time I think you saw this, the dumpster was over here.
There, right.
We can move it back over there if that's not where you guys want it, but
I'm not asking you to move it, I'm just asking for sure that the doors are self-closing,
okay.
mechanically self-closing, and that you improve the enclosure as best you can with the materials that you have and the landscaping, so that that doesn't become the predominant image of the building to your customers.
We do have landscaping around it. I can see if there's any additional space, maybe here in this sod area, we might be able to add something else. But it will be of the same brick materials as the building.
Okay, good. What's the pleasure of the commission?
Mr. Chairman, I have another comment.
Right ahead, Mr. Bergovich.
I'd just like to expound on Mr. Varga's question about the slat wall. And I think that, I know you're going to talk to corporate about that, but I would think that at the very least, if you look at the left side elevation, there's a little portion of slat wall that's basically 3 high. If at all possible, if they're against a full type of treatment like the front, the back, I would think that even just bringing in a small element of that, and if that was Mr. Varga's attempt as well, or if you were talking about the full thing, but it doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, have to be to a full extent like we've got on the front, but this little treatment on the left side shows it's 3 high. If that was incorporated along that back, I think that would kind of do the justice that we were looking for.
Okay, and again, I'll have to check with corporate, just so you know, like the mechanics of how this works. The slat wall, and this is basically a balance treatment for that window.
Right.
It's all provided by the sign company, so we have to see what they can actually do also.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just to note, since it was brought up about placing a sign on the rear elevation that is prohibited by code, so it would require a variance. I think as the discussion, though, has progressed, and as Mr. Varga pointed out very early on in this development's conceptual planning, it was intended that all 4 facades would have uniform architectural treatment, and because there was going to be that sort of interior visibility and access from the site. So we can't offer an opinion on the variance request until we actually see the sign package, but I tend to think it would probably be receptively received by the administration. Again, as long as it's not excessive or anything of that nature. But I just wanted to call out that for the applicant's benefit that it would require a variance.
Is that back through the same board, or is that administrative?
No, that would be the Board of Zoning Appeals. Require a separate application, and again, I don't know that we have your full sign package yet. Initially, the administration reviews your sign package, determines whether or not there's any non-compliant issues. To the extent they see something that would require a variance that they can't approve, they'd inform you of that fact, and generally you get an opinion as to whether or not the administration would be opposed to the request. I'm kind of broadcasting a little bit that it's probably consistent to have rear wall signage on this, given the nature of this development. So, but don't go too crazy on the request.
It would be the same signage on all 4 sides is what we'd be looking for.
Mr. Varga.
I'd like to make one general comment, doesn't have to go on the record, but this is our second facility for Taco Bell in the city, and they've been a bit of a struggle. And the reason I think they're a struggle from a functional point of view, or from a lot of the details we're talking about, is that they're and not that I don't understand why, but they're going to really small sites, which inherently create a lot of problems. I don't know that we'll see a 3rd Taco Bell submission soon, but you might want to, as you talk to corporate about the things you need to talk to them about, I'd get the message back to them that, a little more land would have solved a lot of these problems a lot easier. And this is symptomatic of both the submissions that we've gotten recently, is that the problems come from too much on too small a piece of property.
I'll let them know.
Yeah, thank you.
And mine is more a comment. I mean, I know you addressed this. I'm still very uncomfortable with the traffic flow. I would much rather see the one-way flow traffic around the building. The way this dead ends, even with the turnaround, we're going to have someone trying to turn around, someone else trying to pull in. I just anticipate that causing a lot of trouble.
We just so you have a little more peace of mind. There is only parking on this side. it's not gonna be additional parking where you have two people backing up in that area.
But you're gonna have people coming down that parking side, and I'm gonna have somebody going into this turnaround, trying to turn around to get out. Where if the flow just came right around the building as the drive-through, and it just was one flow, the traffic would flow much easier and you wouldn't have that issue. The two-way traffic in this parking area will cause a problem because it's so narrow.
Taco Bell likes to have the two-way traffic. That's their footprint of their site. McDonald's is always one way. That's just how they always are. And Taco Bell always sets up for two-way traffic. When their customers come in, that's what they more likely expect. And the hope is that the patrons that come here will learn that, and they'll know that it is a dead-end site.
Okay.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the commission?
Mr. Chairman, since the applicant has to go back and speak with corporate regarding Mr. Varga's request with the slats, the potential movement of the electrical panels, some additional landscaping and the circulation solution, maybe we need to hold this until we get that response and see how it all falls together before we approve it.
So you're making a motion to table?
I am, yes, I am, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Could I just interject on that? I don't need to go back to corporate for the traffic flow of what we presented with making this spot larger and putting the stop bar. We can put up the stop sign is how we'd like to proceed with that. If we could get approval on the site plan, or at least a vote on the site plan, that would be great, because we could keep moving forward with that. And then I understand if you would like to see, more back here, we can work and maybe vote on that. We could table that portion if that's something you guys would be able to do.
So your request is to move ahead with the site plan, hold off on the architectural approval?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Zeman, I'll look for your guidance on the language.
It would be a motion to approve the final site plan and a subsequent or concurrent motion to table architectural review.
Okay. Mr. Sidoti, is that fine with you?
Motion to approve the final site plan.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Yes, when you're ready.
Mr. Tiedemann?
Yes.
Mr. Varga?
No.
Mr. Cicero?
No.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic?
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti?
No.
Mr. Snow?
Yes.
4-3.
4-3, so that passes.
Thank you.
And now I'll entertain a motion to table the architectural approval.
So moved.
Second.
Yes, when you're ready.
Mr. Tiedemann? Yes. Mr. Varga?
Yes.
Mr. Cicero?
No, yes, I'm sorry.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic?
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Snow?
Yes. Miscellaneous review of a modification to a planned unit development. Got the big guns here today, huh?
Well, good evening. My name is Gary Bialis. I'm with Omni Senior Living. Also with me is Neil Brennan, and we are for a modification to the Creek PUD. I'm going to have Neil speak regarding the background of the PUD that was here. It actually goes back to 2004, and there's been a lot of changes to it. So he wants to go through that, so some members that may not be familiar with everything that happened with the PUD can be brought up to date. And then I'd like to discuss our project in a little more detail, so you know what we want to do here. So I think the best thing is, let's turn it over to Neil so he can at least bring everybody up on the past changes to the PUD, and then I can take it forward on what I would like to do here.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Brennan?
yeah.
I think I'm here because I was the only one that had a copy of the original approved PUD. And I've always wanted to teach history, so I can give you 15 years of history in a very short period of time. Back in 2003, the Planning Commission and Council approved the rezoning based on a development plan that's before you. This development plan went to the voters in 2003, and they rejected it. In January of 2004, there was a judgment entry to permit Newell Creek development to be developed according to this plan and along with commitments that were made by the developer. Now, this plan was not etched in stone. There was a procedure that was put into place that modifications could be made to the plan and that the Planning Commission had the right to determine whether it was a substantial modification or just a modification. Now, in December of 2004, the first modification came before the commission. And that was to rezone 40 acres, which had originally been shown as residential, a combination of single-family lots and condos. That was rezoned, or the plan was modified to permit Avery Dennison to go in and 40 acres, a 40-acre site to be converted from residential to office, and Norton Parkway was a part of that approval. Subsequent to that, Avery Dennison was built, along with CT Consultant and Noah's Party Center. The next thing that happened on this site was in 2006, Parker Place came in and a 118-suite retirement facility and 3 duplex areas, units were approved. In 2006, that plan was then converted to assisted living, adding 86 assisted living units to it. In 2012, there was a request for a memory care and assisted living that was put in this area. Following that, what had been previously a retail lifestyle center was converted to a medical facility for the Cleveland Clinic. Another major change to the plan. In 2013, this area was a 10-acre site was converted to a skilled nursing facility. So this is where we are currently versus what was originally approved. I think you can see that there have been substantial changes to the plan that have evolved over time, and they have gone through the Planning Commission. The last change was rejected by the Planning Commission, went to City Council. City Council approved it, came back to Planning Commission, and Planning Commission then approved the site. So where we are now is we're asking for a modification for this area between Sterling Drive and Avery Dennison. And Gary, I'll let you take it from there.
Before you go much farther, I think we need to determine now whether we think it's a substantial deviation or not a substantial deviation. Mr. Zeman, any comments from the law department?
It's a substantial deviation.
Okay, so.
Yeah, and left out of the presentation is there's been reviews for prior proposals as well. The area designated lifestyle center was not per se for only retail, but it was intended to have a business, an office component as well. There was a proposal, I can't even remember what year it was, to modify that more to a traditional retail center with an anchor grocery store, I believe it was, and, you know, supportive out parcel development. That was, I don't know if it ever came to a vote, as opposed to it was an informal proposal that was rejected. There's also a proposal for those lands by a developer for an apartment complex that was rejected as well. There was a proposal further along the where Norton Parkway intersects to Garfield Road, just to the north of that for an office component. That was rejected. So it's not an accurate summation that every time a proposal comes in, it's been accepted. The plan has, of course, evolved pretty significantly, and it significantly evolved such that it was recognized that the lands to the south of Norton Parkway were going to be designated for Class A office and medical use, and that plan, let's face it, has absolutely come to fruition. Avery CT Consultants, the Cleveland Clinic is undertaking plans for significant development there. That is the current status of this PUD, office use, not residential, nothing of that nature. So, in my judgment, this is a substantial departure from the current approved development plan. Thank you.
So I guess that's where we are at the moment. So what, just out of curiosity, what's the procedure for substantial deviation?
If the Planning Commission, well, again, it's up to the Planning Commission, I'm just rendering my opinion, but if the Planning Commission believes it is not a substantial deviation, it can approve the amendment. If the Planning Commission opines that it is a substantial deviation from the approved plan, basically what they have to do is kind of go through a rezoning process. There's always the opportunity to go and file an application to have these lands rezoned to B2 or something that would be appropriate for that specific use. But they're going to have to go back and kind of start from square one relative to the proposed use in this area, as opposed to it being an amendment to the approved planned unit development as it currently exists.
Okay, so what we need to do is determine whether we think it's a substantial deviation or not a substantial deviation, correct? Okay. And we can do that by polling the commission?
You should vote on that.
Okay. So why don't we vote on that? Go ahead. Did you have a
Well, I
comment?
was just one question. The question is that it's interesting how a shopping center, which was a shopping center or office, whatever it's supposed to be, went to medical use, and it was not considered substantial. Okay, I'm not sure why, but it wasn't. If this was decided to be office and shopping center, you substantially changed it when it became Cleveland Clinic. So that was done. It was a modification. It wasn't a substantial modification. Determination. With the area we're looking at right now, it was determined to be office. It wasn't originally. It was condominiums and it was retail. There's been no office. Things change. I mean, 2004, it might have been great for office. There hasn't been any knowledge that somebody wants to go here. We actually went to Avery Dennison because we have to go there. They have first right refusal on half the parcel. There's actually 2 parcels. They said, no, we're not interested in it.
Yeah, but we did receive a letter from Avery Dennison indicating that they had some concerns about this kind of development going adjacent to their property.
Okay. Because we did have to notify them that we wanted to come here and see if
I'm
they
sure
wanted
that's
to
what
land.
precipitated the letter.
Probably, yeah. And I note that, we do have a development, and now you have to make a decision. Office, right now, and I've got 2 studies, one from the city that says there's 21, back in 15, there was 21% vacancy. Now there's 26% vacancy. So things do have to change. Things change. All these other sites that got built were residential, and they're similar to what I want to do. And again, I think it was, when the clinic came in, I know it's a big project, but it was considered not substantial. It was a minor modification. I'm not sure how that happened, but I'd say I'm the same way.
Okay.
I'm going back to residential type use that it was at one time.
Well, Mr. Chairman, that was rejected. So, the Lifestyle Center was a promise not kept, and that's the reality. And then the market conditions obviously dictated the fact that it never got built. So, but it was designated for commercial use. Now, the clinic obviously is a higher, better use there. The lawsuit's still pretty fresh in my mind since I was involved with it at the time, and we were told in no uncertain terms that the zoning here was not constitutional because these lands so adjacent at Route 90 were not suitable for residential use. We did our own independent analysis of that. Obviously, the council ultimately agreed on a decision that was in the best interest of the city. Norton Parkway was a direct consequence of that entire process. So to go back to the original plan, which was rejected, where there was some request for residential in that area, again, that came off the table very, very quickly in the history of Newell Creek.
Okay. So what we have to do is we have to vote on whether we think it's a substantial deviation or not. So we'll just go right down the list, Mr. Zeman, right down the commission list and vote?
Yes.
Okay. Call the roll.
How do you want us to
Yeah,
vote?
is it a motion that it's a substantial deviation? Or is that what we're voting on? What are we voting on?
It can be phrased as a motion to, I guess the proper motion to find that it is a substantial deviation. An affirmative vote would be yes, it's a substantial deviation. A no vote would be that it's not. If the no vote carries, then you'd proceed on with the application tonight.
So I'll make that motion, that it is a substantial deviation.
Okay, and is there a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Tiedemann?
Yes.
Mr. Varga?
Yes.
Mr. Cicero?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic?
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Snow?
Yes. Okay, so where does it sit now, Mr. Zeman?
Well, the application can't proceed, but obviously the applicant can come back and pursue a rezoning.
So that's where we are.
Okay.
Final subdivision of 36 residential lots, King Memorial Road.
Good evening, Greg Summers, Summers Real Estate Group. We're back for final approval. We've addressed all of the administration's comments and would ask that the final be approved this evening.
Any comments from the administration?
I guess I would be interested in hearing the applicant's responses to the conditions, in particular the street name change, the driveways proposed on the sublots that are going to be very close to King Memorial Road. I think the other ones are self-explanatory, but those in particular, I know we were waiting on the change of the name from Blish Circle, which is already a street name in Paynesville.
The street name, I believe did we resubmit? Larry, did we resubmit? Okay, so the plat didn't have the second change. Okay. But we submitted, did we submit an alternative street name? Okay. We did come up with one. I apologize, that was more of a miscommunication because I had gotten Larry some revised prints. That was for a second change, but we do have an alternative name and we checked, so I'll get that to you tomorrow. I'm sorry about that.
And then with regard to the second item, with regard to those driveways that would be running parallel, in particular, I believe that's sublot 25. It's going to be extremely close to King Memorial. The suggestion by staff was to make sure that those driveways are positioned on the lot as far away as possible to that intersection, just for obvious concerns, and we wanted that stipulated on the plat.
We're fine with doing that, no problem at all. We'll make sure that's modified on the plat per the recommendation.
Anything else, Kathy?
That is it.
Okay. Commission members, questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Sidoti.
I know we've discussed this before, but all your discussions with the Hidden Glen homeowners associations, that's all ended up in the affirmative and everybody's in agreement?
Yes, we got together with Mr. Blake and the president of the HOA, and we granted them an easement that they can utilize that would improve that drainage situation. And they were really satisfied with the end result. So yeah, yes, we were able to resolve that. They have an easement that they can use that would cut off that 90-degree choke point, per se. And, we're cooperating and providing that. However, I think Sean said it would be to the city, but we offered essentially what we determined to be the best solution, so they were happy. I don't know when they might do that, but the easement will be there for them to
do it.
to utilize. Yep.
And your discussions with Aqua Ohio, water pressures are okay?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. All right, Mr. Chairman, thanks.
You're welcome. Anything else for the applicant,
One question.
Mr. Varga?
I see the plan in front of me, the LP1 drawing. You show boardwalks and trails and pathways, pedestrian pathways. Those are all included in the proposal.
Yes.
And are there any other physical amenities that are not shown but that are anticipated or part of the proposal?
We planned on putting a few benches in and a gazebo. We'll commit to that. She did not show it on the plan. Our priority was to get this looped, just so it'd be a true trail system like we had discussed, but we'll gladly commit to doing a few benches, maybe along the retention pond, and find the best place for a gazebo if that's preferred.
fine.
We're more than fine with doing that.
So we can get that commitment tonight, then that's good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve with the 5 stated conditions.
And
the 6th edition,
the
which
benches and the,
which is
gazebo.
some benches and a gazebo as
Yep.
part of the
We'll
trailside development.
We'll get the plan revised too and resubmit, but yeah, we'll commit to that, no problem.
Okay.
With the 6 conditions.
is there a second?
Second.
Yes?
Mr. Tiedemann?
Yes.
Mr. Varga?
Yes.
Mr. Cicero?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mr. Perkovic?
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Snow?
Yes. You're all set.
Thank you, good evening.
Thank you, Chris.
Director's report?
I guess the only item we would like for the commission to consider was to allow the staff to pursue the text amendments for to modify the meeting schedule of the planning commission if you are in agreement with moving it to once a month as opposed to every 3 weeks. For the benefit
And the
of,
appropriate time for the applicants to respond.
yes, to allow, extending the deadline to allow appropriate time, correct.
I have a question.
Sure.
We discussed this a little bit previous. If there is, because of the time periods, a need to meet in between the scheduled meetings because of now it's a little further apart, what is the status of that meeting? Is it a formal meeting? Is it a
Special
informal-
meeting.
Special
We
meeting?
we used to call them special meetings, but they had the same connotation as a regular meeting.
A special meeting is just one that was not regularly scheduled. You have regular scheduled meetings, special meetings. We have to advertise, of course, the purpose of the special meeting, which would be, general business in that instance. So it may be that if we have something time-sensitive and of significance to the city, that we add a few special meeting dates just to get those applications heard and resolved.
Yeah, we can deal with it.
We can deal with it.
The challenge is today making sure that the facility's available and of course getting a quorum.
I think we're good. So go ahead.
Okay. The other item I'd like to bring up is the administration has, and prior to my arrival here, began working on revisions to the PUD zoning regulations as well as the RVG, the Village Green, and some amendments to that. There were some work sessions that had occurred late in 2017.
Council's work sessions.
Yes, and they have asked us to continue those, so I guess I'd like to make you aware that that is still on the table and a goal to work on, and we would like to continue to proceed with some text amendments with regard to those two particular.
So are we talking about reducing the acreage? Is that one of the reasons?
Reducing acreage. Ron, did you want to add anything else?
That's correct. Yeah, if I might, Mr.
Go
Chairman.
right ahead.
Yeah, as participate in those discussions, the concern of council, and there was just one work session, but the concern relative to the PUD was, again, the size of the current requirements. As members of the commission are certainly well aware, parcels that would enable us to do a PUD have the opportunity for it is reduced significantly. But more importantly, from a planning perspective, the remaining parcels could very well require the creativity that our PUD ordinance provides. So we want to reduce that requirement down, and accordingly, we'll look at the uses and some of the other requirements. But it's basically, it's our most flexible zoning category, and to the extent that there may be opportunities in the city where that could be employed, let's move forward with that. Relative to Village Green, council was, I think, most concerned with the open space requirement that we are dealing with some village greens that, while they might be meeting the spirit of the code in terms of that open space set aside, the reality is we're dealing with smaller, unusable tracts which provide little in terms of buffer or usable open space. So we've spent some time trying to craft something that would be useful from an administrative standpoint, planning commission perspective, and ultimately council. Thank you.
Any questions, commissioners?
Just, are you looking for us to participate in this in any fashion, or you're just informing us?
Well, I guess informing and letting you know that will be coming down the pipe, and we will be working on that and getting
I
those
think it would be
amendments to you.
appropriate, since we're the ones that deal with especially with the RVG zoning, it would be appropriate if we have some input at some point in that dialogue.
You may want to schedule a work session.
We could do that.
Yeah.
When you're ready, you can notify us as to the fact that you are ready, and then at that point, we can determine whether we want to get together.
The alternative to that, Mr. Chairman, would be like individual emails coming from commission members to the administration. That can become a little bit. It's probably best when we've got a deliberative body for everyone to hear their questions and proposed answers. And
That was my
yeah,
point. My point
yeah.
was, when you're ready, let us know.
Okay, but I think a work session may be appropriate for that.
Okay.
Just a little bit earlier.
That's fine. Anything else?
That is it.
Okay, that's enough. Entertain a motion to adjourn. Go right ahead.
Motion to adjourn?